Hello, all of my wonderful fuckers, my chassos, random passers-by that came in and don't really even know what we're doing and why we're here. That is not the one that I wanted. That is the incorrect thing. Let's go to this one. I've been doing way too much hobbying on stream. But we are here with my man Cooper, who is above us. Cooper, just let me know that you can hear me okay, pal?
Yep, you're coming through loud and clear.
All right, so we are going to be talking about today the New South Wales Masters event, which is an invite-only tournament happening in New South Wales. It is invite based on ELO, and they did open up a couple of spots to fill in the roster and that sort of thing. Now, I'm just going to zoom that out so that people can actually properly see it. Let's start with Cooper. Why don't you introduce yourself and let everybody know why you in particular are here on stream with me tonight?
Yeah, hi. My name's Cooper. I'm also Sydney-based, just like Jay. And I've been playing Tau for my entire 40k career. Started late 8th edition back in 2020, right before COVID hit. And so I've been playing Tau ever since then. In terms of achievements, I guess, with Tau, I was the number one in the South Pacific in 2020, the 2023 season. And I think the last GT I went to, actually, I beat yourself at that event and ended up going 5-0 and getting unfortunately got second place on battle points, but yeah, so
Yeah.
I've been doing pretty well for myself decently. I'm on the extended squad for Team New South Wales, so I got an invite through that. I think my Hilo was good enough to get in anyway. I've been a little lax lately with the GTs, but yeah.
Yep.
Tau specialist through and through, and that's why I'm here.
Yeah. So Cooper and I are the only two Tau players going to this event, and I've wanted to have Cooper on for a while because we have been yo-yoing each other in terms of rankings for quite a long period of time. And is also one of the people that when I talk to about the faction or the game as a whole, you don't tend to say any stupid shit that displays you're just meta chasing your list, and you actually understand why stuff is good and why it's not, which is always great for a conversation. So for this event, let's start with the wider point. When you started your 40k, why Tau?
I didn't actually know a lot about 40k when I started. I'd been playing with some I was playing with some of my friends, most of which have started to drop off the competitive scene now, unfortunately. But I was playing with them, borrowing armies. I went to CanCon, which was the former Adelaide Uprising. It was an 8-round event before I bought a single model. Borrowed an army, played there, and then while I was there, I decided to buy Tau because no one that I knew owned Tau. I was like, you know what? No one else is doing this. Let's give it a go, and I've enjoyed it and just enjoyed it ever since.
Yeah, wonderful. All right, so looking at this, there were 5 detachments that you could have picked, and you went with one in particular, which was Oxcad. Similar to me, what was your reasoning? Why did Oxcad stand out? Because we are going to a tournament which is, for the most part, going to be a Shark Tank. Like, there are some of the highest ranked players in New South Wales. Even if maybe some of our earlier rounds are a little bit easier because of the pairing and pod system that we've got, there is nobody that's going to come out of this with 5 moderate to easy rounds. They're going to go against at least 2 other players that it's going to be an absolute sweat fest. So why Oxcad going into that sort of an environment?
Yeah, so just quickly adding on to that, this is the sort of GT you go 3-2 at, and it's like going 4-1 at a normal GT.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
I was actually saying
even going 2-3 here is fine.
Yeah.
It is that stacked.
I was saying on my earlier stream that going to this sort of an event, if I come out of it with a positive win rate, I will take that as a benefit. And also because we're doing differential WTC scoring, I reckon there's got to be a lot of people that aren't just like a strict 3-2. It'll be like, 2-1-2 as their like final score line or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Auxiliary Cadre. The reason I wanted to go Ox Cadre is because Tau's biggest problem tends to be mission play, more specifically focused on the primary denial side. And when I looked at the Ox Cadre build, that's exactly what it provided. In addition, the other thing that really sold me on Ox Cadre is the fallback at the end of the fight phase stratagem.
Yes.
Yes. And then the AP bonuses. So it's the sum of the 3. It's the AP bonus from having the Kroot nearby. It's the fallback at the end of the fight phase stratagem, and it's the primary denial from the admired leader enhancement, and then
L-
just shoving 10 crude or 5 Espid on objective and calling it a day.
Yeah, I really love seeing that on your list because I have been a very, very big fan of Admired Leader once I started thinking about the applications of it. And in all of my testing games, it did incredibly well. Unfortunately for my list, I just didn't have the points to fit it in. And there was nothing that I wanted to cut easily to make it work.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's jump in and have a look at your list. Now, I was having a look at the name of it. Can you tell me what that is and means?
So the list name is Diversity, Equitao, Inclusion, which is not to be confused with diversity, equity, and inclusion. I figured I'd get all three of the parts of my army in the list. It was originally diversity highs, but then I realized I could aim much higher.
Okay. Yep. Very good. Now, are you actually at 1985 points, or is that a list error?
This is a 1985 point list. Yes.
Interesting. My OCD always like triggers the fuck out of me whenever I'm like too far away from the 2000 point mark. Even though I know in game systems like AOS or whatever, there are people that actively do that. But I was having a little bit of a look through your list. And we're looking at double Fireblade, obviously with double gun drones, as we see on everything. We've got a Commander in Cold Star, which is your Warlord, triple missile pod, and a Cyclic Ion Blaster with the Admired Leader enhancement. We've got 2 Breacher teams, both loaded into Devilfish. Double Broadside Battlesuit unit. I've been seeing this a lot more, and I actually really, really love this as a tech piece. This was really hard for me not to take in my list. We've got a Fire Knife unit with missiles. We've got double Hammerhead with ion cannon and accelerated burst cannons. We've got a Kroot Carnivore unit in duplicate. We've similarly got 2 units of Kroot Hounds, 2 units of Kroot Rampages in 3-mans, Pathfinder team with ion rifles and recon drone, triple stealth suit, double Vespid. So let's talk through some of your choices here, Cooper. What was it about Let's start with the breaches, actually. What was it about a breacher? I say breacher-centric, which isn't exactly correct, but it is, there are certain lists that just are not running any breaches whatsoever. What about it really appealed to you?
Yeah, so on the topic of lists that aren't running breaches, I think that should be purely Kroot lists and retaliation cadre lists. I think if you're running auxiliary cadre, Montcar, or Calyon, you should be getting at least 1 unit of breaches in. Yeah, the main reason why breaches are good is because when you push the Devilfish up, you can get the breacher team out on the other side of the ruin. It's really good for hitting staging pieces. The rerolls to wound means they're super efficient, and being able to get plus strength and the plus AP from the detachment rule really takes them to a next level in terms of damage. So that's why I went with them. They're good in all 5 turns of the game. They play Prime Original. They can hit staging units. They just do a lot. Unfortunately, Devilfish can be hard to move in WGC tables, which is kind of that's the downside, but they do a role for the army that nothing else does. So
yeah, I would agree. There were 2 reasons why I didn't take them in my list, and I'm curious if this is a concern for you in some of the pairings. The first is, you already mentioned, Devilfish can be a little bit dicky to move around WTC tables, which was something I was considering when I was looking at an already Devilfish body heavy list that I had, where I was looking at triple Hammerhead, or at least some combination of Hammerheads and Skyrays to take care of that particular role. But the other one was the presence of so many different types of flamers that are existing at the moment. And this is definitely a personal bias, but I constantly get fucking paired into Feud, and then he uses his anti-infantry 2+ flamers, and I'm like, well, okay, cool, I guess I'll go fuck myself. Was that a concern building your list at all, or were you confident that you've got enough other pieces to, either just cop that flamer and cool, like, whatever, or is it something that's sitting in the back of your mind?
Yeah, that's the other weakness of the Breacher team. It definitely is getting overwatched. It is absolutely a concern for that unit. I suppose the answer is you just have to find ways to play around it. Some matchups it just might be a bit too rough to play around, and you kind of just have to hope you need to try to find ways to bait out the Overwatch from your opponent before you'd get the Breacher team out. Like if you can shove enough OC on a mid-board objective to out OC them, they might just Overwatch that Kroot unit instead, and then you can get the Breachers out. But yeah, it's definitely something to be very mindful of.
Yeah. I tend to find
Yeah,
in those matchups, I will often do that with Pathfinders because when somebody's asking about a Pathfinder unit, and it's all the ion rifles, it's everything else. I will try and move that unit first because they, even though they're hitting on fives, if I guide them, they're on fours and they're strength 8, AP2, damage 2, go on AP3 with Oxcad. And there are some times where I can get somebody to think that they are the worst thing that I'm going to send to them. And sometimes, I mean, in Oxcad, they are. And I guess this is something to talk about with the lists in general, that all of our normal pulse rifles, burst cannons, whatever else, just innately getting a pip of AP puts what is already above basic marine level shooting to a much bigger margin where everything in the Pathfinder unit now hits. AP1 doesn't sound like much, but it does change a lot of outcomes. Even if we just talk strict, like expected outcomes statistically for a
yeah,
Pathfinder unit shooting an X unit, AP1 on everything changes so much.
yeah. AP1's massive if you're going for a squad of Space Marine scouts or 10 guardsmen or whatever. AP1 is honestly the threshold you need to kill that unit.
Yeah. So yep, going for the breaches in them. Fire knives, I'm not surprised to see them. I have had a hard time not putting fire knives in any Oxcad lists that I've written. It is so hard
I'm
to
having a
leave home
hard
without
time
them.
not putting fire knives in any list I'm running.
Yeah, I will agree with that.
I'm usually struggling to justify putting in the second or the third unit, but one unit of fire knives with missile pods is always a staple choice.
Yeah.
They feel a nice like long range anti-infantry shooting platform. Um, when I was playing I played Red Cadre at a teams tournament back in December when we still had 3-inch deep strike.
Mm.
And the three fire knife. I was running 3 fire knives for that team's tournament, and they were definitely the best unit there. So
Especially
just
having
applying
rerolls.
my learnings from Red Cadre back down to auxiliary, which is
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
hit hard.
I find that, especially in an army where there are a lot of things that we have to jump through hoops to get our bonuses, which, creates that delta between the worst and the best players, because good players can jump through those hoops and still play their game. But just the fire knives having full rerolls to hit built in is just, it's a breath of fresh air in an army where you constantly are jumping through hoops. But
Yeah, absolutely. It's the full rerolls to hit and it's the ignore hit roll penalties. Like I can shoot something with stealth and know I'm going to hit on 3s fully rerolling.
yeah, and there are so many modifiers to hit at the moment. That's where there was a version of my master's list that was fire knives, it was riptides, it was broadsides with the weapon support system, all that sort of stuff, because -1 for Tau is genuinely just really shit to have to deal with. So being able to ignore that is massive. Um, Speaking of broadsides, let's talk about those for you. So you've gone a 2-man, you've gone heavy rail, seeker missile, weapon support system, and double missile drone. Exactly where I was running, and it's uncanny the number of choices that you've made that mirror exactly what I was going to do if this was the iteration. So talk through the broadsides, strengths, weaknesses, and how you might actually plan to use them. Obviously, matchups will change things quite a bit, but if there's a general sort of strategy and game plan for them, what you might be planning.
Yeah, so I haven't run broadsides in a tournament for 3 years. This will be the first time I've had them on a table for a long time.
Yep.
Basically, I needed a source of dedicated anti-tank. With the amount of hulls I have in my list. So if I'm running 2 Devilfish and 2 Hammerheads with Ion, if I want anti-tank, I'm running a Railhead or a Skyray, or a Railhead or 2 Skyrays or a Railhead Skyray. So I reckon I need to run at least 2 of them. And I'm not sure if you've tried moving 6 Devilfish hulls in a WC board, but it just doesn't
Fucking
work.
sucks. It sucks.
So that's where the broadsides come in. Between the assault stratagem and being able to strategic reserves, I'm happy that they can play firing lines and get just enough movement they need. And I suppose the thing that really pushed me over the edge is I've been keeping up to date with a lot of the auxiliary cadre lists that have been doing well overseas and also in Australia. Shout out to John O'Bishop at Adelaide Uprising and Donald Plummer over in the US. They were both running the single unit of broadsides, and if you're not sure, it's good to just see what works and trust that it's good for a reason.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a world where you strat reserve them rather than putting them up the board, because obviously the big downside of the broadsides is always the movement, always.
Yeah.
Even with assault, sometimes it's just an Achilles heel that you can't get past. Do you know if there's any matchups where it's just automatic nut, these are going in reserve?
I haven't thought about it too much. My round one, if we're going to get ahead of ourselves, is Custodes. They're probably
Yep.
going to start on the table, just because they've got a grab tank, and I kind of want to keep the thing honest.
Yep. Yep.
Because if I keep the grab tank honest, the rest of my army doesn't have to be honest. And yeah, so I'm probably going to start the broadsides on the table against Custodes, because it's on a search and destroy map with some really wide firing lines. And round two, I'm expecting to play against Admech, and they'll probably start on the table there, just because playing against Alex, and he's got so many bodies that it's going to be really hard to find a place to deploy them effectively.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
So it's kind of a matchup dependent thing. I think you can reserve them if you feel like they're not going to need to shoot turn one if you go second. If you're playing against Knights, for example, they always need to start on the table, because if you start your dedicated anti-tank off the table and then the Knights just full send, like, what are you going to do? So
Yep.
It's about finding the matchups. It's better to put them in strategic reserves, but you can only put them in strategic reserves if, starting them off the table doesn't change the way your opponent moves around the board. Because if you're playing against heavy vehicle skew, they have to start on the table. Otherwise, your opponent just deploys on the line and walks forward if they go first, and you can't do anything about it. So you just need to juggle that concern, I guess.
Very good. Very good. Now, was it hard for you to pick out the war gear that you were going to take on these guys, or was that a pretty set choice that just clearly stood out as the best thing to take?
Again, because I haven't really played with broadsides, I kind of just defaulted on what everyone else, like what all the other top players overseas were running. Everyone's been running, like all the good players have been running that loadout basically for the last year. So, if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it. That's just the logic I took.
I think that the missile drones are kind of non-negotiable. We don't want to take shield drones because it pushes us into bring it down territory for giving up way too much per model. Oh, sorry, per 2-man unit. And we, like, when we look at the Rail Seeker weapon support system combo, yes, you could go for something like Twin SMS, or is it just normal SMS for them?
It's twin linked, I believe.
Yeah, so Twin SMS, but I just tend to find that, like, for the role that I'm wanting broadsides to fill and us having a split fire penalty in place, I would rather have the Seeker missile for the first turn activation strength, because usually after that first activation, I'm either expecting the broadsides to get clapped in return or not have any more targets to actually target, and then in either case, like, what do I really care about them having, output or whatever? They might be bodies that I put onto an objective. But yeah, just having that first turn where you peek them out, you shoot at something, and having the 2 extra Seeker missiles and not having to worry about hit modifiers, it's hard to be beaten by anything else that they can take, in my opinion.
Yeah, not being able to be smoked is big, and also the Seeker missiles are great because if you shoot a vehicle that even has a 5-up invul, you should be able to kill it.
Yep.
If you're just running your rail rifles and the vehicle that's shooting's got a 5-up invul, don't expect to kill it.
Yep. Especially with variable damage.
You'll miss one hit or wound, even if you're guided by stealth suits. You'll miss at least one, and then they'll pass one invul, and then you won't kill them. So that's why the Seeker missiles are good.
Yeah, then the Fire Knives, I don't think there's too much to say there. Fire Knives have been a staple for, like, the longest time. Now, something that I don't know if you watched Scotty's tournament preview stream with Greg, but he put my list up on the one of the previews, and they were a little bit taken back by the ion cannons. Now, for me, ion cannons, they were good before OxCAD came out. We just weren't seeing them because RetCAD was absolutely the flavor that a lot of the top players were going for, and with good reason with 3-inch deep strike. But the ion cannons now, they were a little bit taken aback by the fact that I was taking them. They called them off meta. Now, I know exactly why I love them and why I'm probably going to be taking them on every platform that I possibly can. But what was when you were looking at your anti-tank platforms or your anti-Terminator or whatever it might be, what was your reasoning for the ion cannons being in here? usually we're thinking about this paired with our other choices. Obviously, you went down the route of broadsides. So talk us through that. Like, what about an ion head appeals to you enough to put in duplicate?
So I'll just start with the allegations of the being off meta. That's completely fiction.
Well, that was
Ever
two
since the- ever since-
non-Tau
ever since
players,
the-
by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ever since the Riptide went up, the Hammerhead with Ion Cannon has just been our most effective gun. In like all versions of, except for Retaliation Cadre. The reason why you don't see them in Retaliation Cadre is because it doesn't benefit from the faction rule.
Yeah.
But Ion Hammerheads were a staple in Montcar, Kauyon, and in the Crew detachment.
Yep.
So much so that they're probably the first thing that goes into a lot of those lists, except for maybe breaches and fire knives. Like those are the thing, and stealth suits. Those are the things you just shove in all the Tau lists. And yeah, so I think ion cannons, they're just a very efficient shooting platform. And that's kind of what Tau want, right? They just want the most efficient gun a lot of the time. So I'm just going to put the most efficient gun on my list. It can kill, especially if you go to +2 strength, there's a lot it doesn't kill.
Yep.
The +2 strength and the +1 AP really do just amplify the starter sheet.
It really does. And like I look at even like I have included a railhead in my list, but it's only the one. And that was because I wanted to have a very strong first turn activation anti-tank, but I didn't have the points to splash into the double broadsides. There were other stuff that I wanted to take, but like the two ion heads were non-negotiable for me. Absolutely non-negotiable. Yeah. And it might be something if people aren't playing all that much or they're not playing against really good players with optimized lists, +1 to hit on top of our +1 ballistic skill may not seem like much. It may not seem like it's the be all end all, but until you've run a hammerhead shooting at something, hitting on 2s as a Tau player, that's not a number we get to interact with a lot. That is like a Custodes only, yeah, okay, you're cool, whatever. But it is just so goddamn efficient. And even though you don't get it against non-monster, non-vehicle, in that instance, I don't really care because I might be benefiting from blast, or I may only need like a couple of those to go through to do significant damage. But then you've also got Seekers and Accelerator Burst Cannons all hitting on 2s, which means if I'm worried about the wound roll, I am likely getting all of my stuff through in the hit roll, which means that I can spend my reroll for the wound roll. I can use stealth suits to make that even more effective. And there's still no slouch on that first turn activation because it's that ion cannon, which is good throughout the entire game, plus the 2 Seeker missiles to really slap somebody when they first sort of light up. And across a lot of my games, it's, we will slam each other with vehicles, transports, tanks counter firing, all that sort of stuff. So that first turn activation sometimes is the most important activation, at least in a good number of my games. Ironhead's going to put in a lot of work, but as we mentioned before, on WTC layouts, they can be a little bit of a pain in the ass to try and position correctly.
Yeah.
Alleviated, and I don't know if you've found this as well, actually alleviated a lot by the rotation rules that came into effect, where it's just 2 inches, so I can do multiple drift slides through tricky areas and only lose 2 inches of movement. Not having to sit there with my opponent where I'm measuring from the back of the model, move it this way, measure from the back of the model, do it this way. It's swing once, and then as long as I'm able to go through without touching anything, cool, I'm easy.
Yeah, and the thin center, because you know how the hammerhead has got the gun drones poke out and then it goes back in. It means that you can just hook yourself around a wall a bit easier as well. Yeah. So that even better, like a little bit more maneuverable than a Rhino, technically. Rhinos are smaller, so they are just more maneuverable, but yeah, just don't. You can take sharper rotations because you're indents on the side.
Yeah, I don't know if you've looked at it. There's a couple of WTC maps where right against the edge of the board, normal transports at our width can't fit through, but we can actually send our ass through first and drift through there without going off the board and without touching the wall. It's actually fucking goated. Yeah,
I've seen a few of those. I figured in some TTS tournaments, I figured that out the hard way, like rocking up to the match going, can I actually go through here? Then doing it very slowly going, yes, I can. Yeah.
All right, and then the double crit carnivores, it doesn't look like you went for any of the special weapons. The Tangle Bomb or the thing on the leader. Now, normally Kroot don't do any sort of appreciable damage. Was the Tangle Bomb something you considered, or is this like a WYSIWYG thing where you didn't
It's
own?
a WYSIWYG thing.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I thought it might have been.
I've got 20 of the new Kroot. I just didn't have them built or painted and couldn't be bothered to do it in time for the event. So
Yeah, fair.
Yeah,
Fair.
that's all it is.
So then having this many Kroot bodies, and this is something that I have been, as I did my list building, I started out having more Kroot than I actually needed throughout, playing those games. And then I've gotten to a point, and I think you've got one extra unit of, actually, we have the same amount of Kroot because I've got a Lone Spear and you've got an extra Carnivore unit. But I just find that if we play correctly, having this amount is usually more than enough. The big one that I want to talk about, though, is the Rampages, because I have been in love with these guys. Absolutely in love with them. Either to slamming them into somebody or baiting people who were scared of them. They kill them, and I'm like, cool, that's 95 points that I don't really care about. Here's 3 hammerheads. So talk me through the Rampages. Were these a difficult thing for you to throw into the list? And did you consider a Lone Spear, or is 2 3-mans just not enough to go with that investment?
Yeah, so I wanted to run more Rampages, but unfortunately I only own 6. So this is restricted with the technology we have.
Yep.
And yeah, so if I had access to more Rampages, I would have considered a 6 and a 3, or a 6 and 2 3s.
Yeah, okay.
I would have needed to test that out. I would have needed to test the 6-3-3 a lot more though. But yeah, so 2 3s, that's what I have. They went into my list like very quickly. My list got to like 1800 points super fast. So it was about figuring out that last 200. So the Rampages are in there, and as you were saying, I don't particularly want to run the Lone Spear because I only have 2 units of Rampages, and I don't really want to be using a Lone Spear to buff up my Kroot and my Kroot Hounds. So yeah, if I was running a 6 Rampager and a 3 Rampager or a 6-3-3, then I'd include the Lone Spear. But with only 6 Rampages in my list, I didn't think I'd be getting enough value out of the Lone Spear to warrant taking it.
Yeah, fair. I can actually answer because I tested this one. The 6-mans on a WTC table with 10 ruins, it's just way too much. It's way too much to try and position and get around. And because we can't do what Thunderwolf Cav do, which is the 19-inch auto advance and charge, I found positioning was so tight that it'd be great in some matchups, but there were so many of them where we just, unless you're doing like a turn 1 scout and then move and then whatever, and the thing that's really put these guys on the map for me is the Oxcat advance and charge, which they desperately needed.
Yeah, it's absolutely that.
Yeah, the 6-man I was looking at, but I went away from because the 2 3s are just so much easier to position. Just so much better from a usability standpoint. Thank you, baby. Oh, no, I'm okay. Oh, Dan's in the chat, filthy Tau players. Yeah, you're damn right. Welcome to Tau Town, baby. I hope I pay you and I can show you that a 2-up armor save don't mean shit. How you doing, buddy? So yeah, the 6-man I just found from a usability standpoint, I wanted to have those 2 bodies and also having an extra set of bodies to give out the extra AP. But again, I was running a list that was pretty skinny on Tau, so a 6-man would have been too much of an investment into one place. But if we were on like an 8 ruin ITC table, or GW terrain would be perfect for them, because they've got those perfect little L nook of the bases, sit behind it, run through because there's no wall in front of you, and just slap whatever walks onto the objective in front of you. But I just found WTC, there was too much for me to have to move around.
Yeah, a lot of the problems I've been having with Cadre list design is the fact that it feels like every unit in the Tau book is viable in it. So it's a weird problem to have, but it makes list building super difficult because you always go above 2,000 points and have to figure out how to go back down.
Yes.
But so the source of inspiration for I initially moved away from the 6 Rampages. I played a single practice game. I auto-advanced them 6, gave them advance and charge, and then had to do a 4-inch charge, which I failed with a CP reroll.
Oh my god, Cooper!
At least it was just a TTS game against someone, but they were just I just pumped 3 CP into this unit to kill 5 assault intercessors to get kill more on Purge of the Foe.
Yeah.
and I pretty much lost that practice game because of it. So that was a
Oh,
bit
that's
sad.
so rough, especially because you know that that's not the average that you should be going off, and
Yeah.
you want to see the result of that play. You want to see what comes next, but then you're just standing in the open with your dick in your hand, like, okay, cool. I guess this is what we're
Yeah,
doing.
because they were going to charge, then they'd be behind a ruin to get ready to countercharge the thing that came onto my natural expansion objective next turn. Because they got stuck out in the open, the thing that charged onto my counter expansion, onto my natural expansion objective, also charged the rampages, and half of them died.
Oh no!
But yeah. Anyway, the source of inspiration for wanting to go back to the 6-man was Hayden Walduck in the Gladiator Teams tournament 2 weeks ago. So for those who don't know, Hayden Walduck is the best Tau player in Australia. If anyone claims they are the best Tau player in Australia, they're lying to you.
They are
Hayden
wrong.
Walduck is.
They are straight wrong. Yep.
And so he went to Gladiator Teams and he had a 5-0 individual record, and he had the 6 rampages in his list with a 3 and a lone spear. So that's why I was looking at that.
Yep.
Yep.
I think in a team's environment,
settled on 3-3 because I don't have enough.
Yeah, in a team's environment, I would probably feel a little bit differently, because I think with table selection, if you've got a good captain able to get matchups for you, I think that would make a pretty big difference.
Yeah.
But because it's a singles event, yes. Oh, well, actually, we didn't have the map layouts when I was solidifying my list. So by the time we got the map layouts, I don't think I wanted to even consider pivoting.
Yeah, we got a standard set of WC mediums, which I'm happy with. We didn't get any of the super Ls, which is good.
Yeah, we
so
really
when I say
don't
standard
like
mediums,
super Ls.
we got all the medium tables that didn't have super Ls, and that's the best way to have it for a Tau player.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
a lot
absolutely.
of armies. A lot of armies just don't like super Ls. They're really polarizing sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, so then is there anything else that's particular to? I think the thing that I want to talk about is the Vespid. Now, you, like me, didn't take a 10-man, and I stand by that as a choice. I have found them underwhelming, but I wanted to get your take on these, because Vespid for me are an auto-include, at least one unit, if I can help it too. Have you had any experience with the 10-mans? Is that something you considered at all?
I looked at the math and immediately decided it was bad and didn't even bother trying it. Hitting on 4s with no access to rerolls to hit and no ways to increase your ballistic skill or any bonuses to hit. Like, why? Why do you want a shooting unit that hits on 4s with no bonuses? Just so you can give it, spend 2 CP for full rerolls to wound and +1 AP? Yep. I'm just going to spend that CP elsewhere.
Yep. I gave it a fair crack, because I'm not a fan of judging something without like first-hand experience and evidence, and I came to the exact same conclusion. Just, why am I shoving this into my list when there are like 3 other things that I can think of for this? Or having a 5-man where I'm not struggling to, because this was the other thing, like Vespid with the uppy downy, you are at stages of the game trying to fit them into little nooks to do actions or be on places of the board that you have to have them there, and a 10-man takes up more room than a 5-man. I know, massive shocker, but I wanted to have, like, I don't need them for damage. Tau does not struggle for damage sources across basically the entire codex. Our biggest problems are that we, need utility, we need mission play, and we need to like take away some form of like staging areas or make people step out. And that's something I think Oxcad does really well. But a 10-man Vespid unit, I would feel extremely differently if they gave us like, the Vespid get access. Honestly, I think the oversight drone, rather than ignore cover, should be gained for the greater good when taken in a 10-man. But, that's something for the design team. But yeah, I just could never validate the 10-man, even though having a railgun, the grenade launcher is amazing and the flamer is great. But then you've got none of the stacking bonuses that make that stuff go from good to, man, I really need to have this in my list.
Yeah, so I've been shooting Vespid since the 9th edition codex launched. The Vespid profile, they lost an AP going to 10th edition, which is pretty normal.
Yeah.
And, I've been running Vespid since the uppy downy change, since they got normal uppy downy.
Yeah.
And every time I've shot a Vespid since the start of the 9th ed codex, I've been highly, highly underwhelmed.
Yeah.
And as a result, when I saw you could get a 10-man and, put all these guns on it, I just didn't even give it a second thought, because I already know how bad Vespid shooting is from experience, that it wasn't even worth thinking about, in my opinion.
And you see a lot of people that are big fans of them online or whatever, and everybody's got an opinion. But I just look at something that can't get all of the buffs and make something actually good. Even, like if custodies get access to something like reroll ones, they go from like really good to fucking godly. And it's just that efficiency that we need. Yes, the Vespid could spike, and yes, they could do well. But I want something I can set my watch to. I want something that I know every time I activate it, that yes, stuff might massively spike against me, but that's not the norm. That's not the expected result. And I think that's where they sit for me. Now, just to give a little bit of a contrast, I want to go through my list as well, which I've lovingly named Getting These Sharks Nerf too, because I'm claiming full responsibility for the Tiger Shark nerf. It's no coincidence. I took them to a GT, did very, 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 very well with them, and then they were nerfed the next day. But, whatever. I'm not saying that
it's not Lewis, what's his name, who got fourth at LGT with the Tiger Shark and played against Josh Roberts.
Nope, definitely me. Definitely me. I'm 100% claiming it. It's but I've gone. There are a lot of the same pieces that Cooper and I were talking about are present here. Now, a few key differences. I was going to go for 3 missile pods, but I ended up going for the high output burst cannon on the Cold Star. I think that one of the things going from 9th to 10th, and Cooper, if you've got a similar feeling or a different feeling, like I loved the high output on the Cold Star in the 9th iteration. I think it losing the point of AP was a really big blow to that weapon. But this thing now in Oxcad being 2 burst cannons strapped together, a point of AP, and then the re-rolls from the Fire Knives, the ignore modifiers, whatever. It just like, yes, you'll miss the 2 missile pod shots when you're going into that preferred unit, but it also gives my Fire Knives the ability to, look at a big, big Krieg unit and have something which is able to kind of like burn through them with high output stuff. So I've enjoyed that in my testing, and so that's where I've gone for there. I've got the Lone Spear with Fanatical Convert. Now, obviously, I've spoken about this a little bit. Fanatical Convert not only lets it guide for somebody, but also lets it be guided. So I found there were some key points in games where rampages going in were actually a big difference maker for a play going off. And when you roll for the hunting javelin, like you got the Kroot gun hits on 3s natively. But I cannot trust my dice under any circumstances whatsoever. So the Blast Javelin becomes a natural thing to look at, where you've got not only the blast keyword on it, but a D6, and all you need is 1 hit. Then being able to guide that makes it so that it's potential, like you won't use it all the time, but at the moment that you need it, being able to improve his ballistic skill, potentially give ignore cover or rerolls, it just was a really, really nice point of efficiency for this model. Fire Knives, I've gone for a Ghost Keel. I have found them incredibly useful for not only being a beneficiary of the +2 strength with the Cyclic Ion Raker and the extra AP, but also it's just a really fucking annoying unit, and I love it. And it's basically an Ion Cannon strapped onto a Lone Op blank 2 damage sources thing. And I know the Ghost Kills are not for every list, but in my iteration of the list, it just worked. I've gone triple Hammerhead, one of them a Railgun, the other 2 Ion, single unit of Carnivores, 2 Kroot Hounds, 2 Rampages, Pathfinder team, and then I've gone for double Razor Shark, and this one threw Greg and Scotty for a fucking loop. They were like, what the fuck am I looking at? I haven't seen this for like 4 editions. And there's a few key things with this that made me make the choice to bring the Strike Fighters in.
Yeah, I think your Strike Fighters are why you're on stream.
Well, he hasn't confirmed that I'll be on stream, but I can...
No, as in why your list was on stream.
Oh, why why it was... but Cooper, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be on stream round 1 because it's me. He had a request for Tau and Guard, and I'm versing Timmy Wallace. So I may actually be, but... So I was looking at these guys, and aside from the fact that I love my planes, I really love combined arms detachments, there were a few key problems that I wanted to solve. And the biggest one that I have struggled with in the past against very, very good players is that staging locations become incredibly obnoxious to try and deal with, especially with, like, if there's a big Death Star unit, like the Death Company bricks or Sangard, or, like, just units that can sit behind a wall you can't interact with, and then they're able to just rush forward and do whatever they want to do. And, you know, Cooper mentioned that one of his plans is that like breaches can jump a wall and shoot at somebody that's on the other side. If they're staging too close to that, then that stops being an option. And because I was running without breaches, that's also not an option for me. Razor Sharks don't care about bases, they only care about walls. So it means that I can take away a number of staging areas with a unit that when it shoots at something without fly, even if it's not guided, it's hitting on threes. If it's guided, it's hitting on twos. And then you start throwing all the other tower buffs on top of that. The 8-shot ion gun is twin linked and it carries 2 Seeker missiles and a missile pod. So this is something that I was looking at, that I can get onto units that he wants to keep safe and damage me something fierce, but I'm also still backed up by a lot of Kroot. I'm backed up by Fire Knives and Hammerheads. And, you know, if I go into a matchup where they can't deal with the Razor Sharks, I'm getting multiple turns of these guys flying around the battlefield doing whatever they need to, shooting at whatever at a 30-inch range, which is pretty obnoxious. Testing went very, very well for them. It is a very, very promising start, but obviously the trial by fire of actually being in a GT environment is where you determine if something is good or it isn't. Cooper, gloves off opinion. Would you run something like this? Are you worried about pairing it in the town mirror? Or are there any fundamental flaws that you see with this type of list design?
I just think they're a little bit too expensive, if I'm going to be honest. They do what they clearly have an intentional role in your army, which is always good. Being able to, again, exactly what you said, being able to see things behind a wall because they are aircraft, and therefore you measure off true line of sight. You ignore like obscuring doesn't exist to aircraft. The only issues that I would potentially find with it is, one, to get guided, you need something else that can see inside that staging ruin, which means that whatever you're shooting will probably have cover. So then it's about committing a Kroot unit and a guiding unit behind. And because they're planes, they don't really have a secondary purpose. Their only job is to kill.
Yep.
So I think I'd still I'm not particularly worried about them, if I'm going to be honest. Tau noted for having many things that fly as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can see where you're coming from. It. I'll have to see how the tournament wraps out, and maybe I'll give it a try myself. But I don't really see it going any of my lists, at least at the moment.
No, I'd say the guiding thing is a fair criticism, and that's where I hadn't considered them in other detachments except for Oxcad. Because if I'm shooting at something and I've got the +1 to hit, there's been a lot of instances where I don't need guiding for them, because the Kroot Hounds I've been using as effectively as I can to use their speed, pop one guy over a wall so he can see them, and then I functionally have ignore cover. Which has been sort of the use case of, but then again, there are still a lot of armies in the meta that like they want to kind of rush out and be in places that are just natural targets for the Razor Sharks anyway, or they want to shoot us down lines that we can return fire on, and all it takes is one stealth suit to pop his little base over and be able to see down that line, and I'm good to go. But yeah, they definitely are something that, and this was a point of annoyance for me when I was running the double Tiger Sharks, where I copped a lot of hate for that from players at the tournament. And, you know, I was chatting with Alex about it, that like the major thing that people were missing is that they look at the damage numbers on it. They're like, oh my God, this platform's insane. It's like, yeah, but I've got like 600 points tied up in not playing the game. And that is a massive, massive weakness. So I feel like with a list like this, you know, it is me taking a little bit of a risk, but I feel like I'm good enough of a player to still play the primary game. But I know that when the death spiral happens in a bad sequence of events, bad dice rolls, whatever else, my death spiral will be a lot worse than, say, if I was playing your list in the same situation.
Yeah.
But that said, I am so fucking keen for it. These boys haven't been on the table since Sun Sharks were fucking broken in ninth. and I'm just keen to put him back down there. Maybe cause a little bit of psychological trauma at the event, and have people say that they're bullshit and I'm a piece of shit for bringing him. But
Yep.
yeah, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? All right, so, mate, let's have a look at the roster. And I've got your pod up here, which isn't going to show up well on the stream. Maybe if I pull this out, we can see it, my beautiful boy, the God Emperor Cavill. Let's just drop that down so everybody gets to see him properly. Prayers to the God Emperor. Thank you for your beautiful jawline. Let's extend that out. So you are in pod 2. Now, were you affected much by the reshuffle of pods that we had?
Yes, 3 new opponents.
Aside from the 3 new opponents, more to, would you have preferred your last pod? And if so, why? Or is the change better? And if so, why?
So my previous pod, I originally thought that we were playing Seed 1 versus Seed 4, Seed 2 versus Seed 3, because that's the traditional, shall we say, like how everywhere else does it.
I think WTC runs like that.
But we're playing first seed versus third seed and second seed versus fourth seed, and I've never seen that before in a seeded bracket. Originally in the other team, in the other pod, we should probably just quickly talk about pods for chat. Basically, the entire tournament is getting split up into 4 groups of 10. You play, I think it's 2 rounds in your pod.
I think
right?
that it's 2 rounds seeded pods, and then it's Swiss after that.
Yep, so it's 2 round seeded pods, and then you go to Swiss after. Everyone who wins their pod gets slided into a top cut.
Yeah. So basically what we'll be looking at...
If you win your pod, the worst you can come is 10th.
Yep. So what we're looking at, we've got the Greek, which is Alex and Glazos. We got Cooper, we got Rimmel, we got Alex Stone. So the Greek will play Rimmel in the first round. Cooper will play Alex. Then... within the pods, do you know, is it if you win your first game, does it go off winners versus winners, losers versus losers? Or does it just then go to, nope, number 1 plays number 2, number 3 plays number 4?
It should be winners versus winners, losers versus losers.
Yeah.
And I imagine the winner, I'm not sure if it's like slided all the way down. I know that there's definitely a top cut, but I think there were talks about doing like a full bracket system. I haven't paid enough attention to the preamble.
I think we'll get a full blurb from the TOs when they're actually setting up on the first day. But at the very least,
I assume Scotty said something and it's in the player pack. I just haven't read it.
It probably is. It probably is. But then I look at my pod up here in pod 9. I've got myself, Andrew Sherman, Tim Wallace, and James Middleton. So I'll be playing Timmy Wallace on his guard, round 1, and then whoever wins out of Sherman and James Middleton, I will then verse them if I won in the second round, or if I lose to Tim, I will play whoever loses from Andrew and James. So that's the pod system, and this has all been done from a seeding system, based on ELO. So essentially the player number 1 in each of the pods is from the top 10 within New South Wales. Everybody in seed 2 is then from 10-20. Everybody in seed 3 is so on and so forth. So what it means, and this is actually something that I thought was a great idea, that, you know, you don't have, because there are plenty of times where, let's say, for example, Cooper and I pair each other round 1, or equally skilled players pair each other early on, and then you're like, cool, I'm either submarining or like, this is my tournament just done. Because there are plenty of players that I can go into that I've got a clear skill advantage over, and you play your rounds that way, steadily moving into the pairings that you should have later in a tournament. But this basically guarantees that people from certain seedings will not see each other until later in the tournament, reducing submarining and making it so that on average you are playing I would say a more balanced tournament where like your first round isn't likely to be a monstrous sweat fest.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's our pod system. So let's talk your pod. You've got...
Sorry, we'll bump back to an earlier question. I would have preferred the old pod.
Okay.
I think I would have preferred to play against Nathan Princey in round 2 rather than Alex and Glasos. Just the lists are a little bit easier.
Yep.
I think World Eaters is a better matchup for me than this MSU AdMech build that he's got going on.
Yep.
I
Now,
play
Dan, you've
against a
said
lot of
this a
leaders
couple of
lot more
times in
as well.
chat. Sorry, Cooper. You mentioned a repair before. And you said soz not soz. So I'm assuming you're the cause of the reshuffle for the pods.
He is.
So what happened there? Actually, Cooper, you sound like you're in receipt of the actual the biz. What happened there?
I'll just scroll up through the Discord. There's a verbatim message from him. Just might take me a minute to find it.
That's fine. So I'll talk through, while you're looking for that, I'll talk through my pod. So I am actually happy with the reshuffle myself as well. James Middleton is still in the pod, but it moved on Zach Futura and Peter O'Neill, which are two good players. Most importantly, I was going to be versing Zach, and that's Chaos Knights on Search and Destroy, which I did not want to chance if I fucked up my positioning, if I didn't get first or second or whatever I needed. Chaos Knights being able to sprint through walls on the shortest distance to get to my backlines or whatever, it is just uncomfortable. Going into guard, however, I feel like my list does very, very well. I have a lot of tools to handle the things that guard don't want me to be handling, or I can hide from a lot of stuff. I can use mobility advantage. There's a bunch of things that I can do to mitigate guard. Chaos Knights, even just as a stat check, is a fucking coin flip. Like, there are some times where you just don't get the wound rolls, they get the invuln saves, and it just, your game plan falls apart. So I am actually very, very happy with the reshuffle. So thank you, Dan. Dan fell downstairs. Oh shit, hope you're okay, dude.
Yeah, sorry. The verbatim message, which I have found, is, well, lesson learned. I shouldn't joke about Jody accidentally falling downstairs, because I did that today while holding 2 tables that fell on me. Rip Masters. So a bit of a karmic fall.
I'm sorry that I'm laughing, but that's
words.
actually like such a funny message.
Yeah.
All right. So, Cooper, obviously Alex E is a boogeyman of your pod, but I feel like for the other two players, you're a boogeyman as well. Even Alex, I don't know if he will feel super comfortable going into you.
No.
Yes, he's got a lot of bodies, but you do have a lot of high quality shooting, and you've gone more into the bodies that can screen him than, say, I would. I actually think that you are in a much better position to take down Alex than my list is.
Yeah, the only thing I really could have done differently is if I had the high output burst cannon on the Cold Star. That's like the only little thing that would have helped that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I know I theoretically have the tools to beat Alex. I think this is realistically a game that comes down to player skill. I think Alex is a better player than me, so I just need to outplay him on the day.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Fair. Then looking at the other two, so you got Alex Stone round 1, and we were talking about this a little bit in our preamble, and you were feeling confident going into Custodes, and I figured that'd be a good thing to sort of talk about, because I feel the same going into Stodes. I don't tend to struggle on Tau, and we kind of just skull drag them. So, you know, are there any particular thoughts that you've got on game plan, why Custodes tends to be a little bit more of an easy matchup? You were mentioning around their grav tanks and that sort of stuff. So talk us through that. Like your round 1, what is the likely outcome there?
Yeah, so I haven't lost to Custodes in a tournament ever with Tau. Sorry, no, I lost them once when they were playing Jet Bike Spam when their Codex launched, I should say. But that was a completely different way of playing Custodes.
Yep.
Yeah, so when they're playing the infantry builds, the Tau, like we've seen my list, it's really good at killing elite infantry. One Feel No Pain, yes, it mitigates it, but it doesn't really mitigate it well enough, especially if I can threaten... If I'm ever in a position where I can threaten to shoot 2 squads of Wardens in a turn, they don't really want to pop 2 Feel No Pains, especially if it's early game. And if the squad standing on the objective isn't a Warden squad with Feel No Pain, it does just die. So I'm not particularly worried. I have the screening tools to play against them. I can auto-see them using Admired Leader when it's necessary. I think I should be I think I'm fine. I think I'll be fine overall. Like, I played against Custodes a lot, so I'm just happy if I go with my normal game plans, she'll be right.
Yeah, excellent. Are there any other players going to this tournament that you would be particularly worried about, either from like a list build perspective, that they just have a lot of things that you don't know if you'll deal with well, or are there any players that you're kryptonite? Because there are just some people within the New South Wales circuit, or I feel like anywhere, where they're like, if I get paired into X person, for whatever reason, the game just doesn't go well?
Yep. So I think Jordan McGregor on his Imperial Knight build is probably going to be the worst matchup for the both of us.
Yep.
Just he's playing Mass Armigers in Imperial Knights, and he's one of the best players in the room. So it's a bad matchup, and he's an incredibly good player. So I think that's going to be the hardest matchup of the event for the two of us. Apart from that, it's your usual suspects from Team New South Wales, Team Australia that I'm kind of worried about. I haven't looked at the lists too much in depth. So there will be some circumstances where Tau is favored in the matchup, and then, should be able to get a win there. But yeah, this event is stacked. It's not really worth highlighting too many individuals, but I will just shout out Jordan McGregor in particular.
Yeah, that's the Armiger spam is definitely something that I was considering, because he'd played it at so many events previous that I could not go into my list building stage without at least considering that there would be that on the table. And if I do well enough, if I get paired into him, like it's a hell of a stat check. It's a hell of a stat check, especially because there's so many bodies. But yeah, how would you feel going into Woody's Space Wolves? Because Space Wolves, for much of for much of 10th, the Stormland Space Wolves has almost been an auto loss for Tau. Do you feel like you've got your head around what it wants to do? Have you got enough tools with Kroot and whatever else to keep them at bay, or would you consider that still an auto loss situation?
I think it's probably an auto loss unless I very much outplay Woody or get incredibly lucky. Unfortunately for me, Woody is a good player, so I'm not sure if I can get the required amount of player skill expression to pump over it. But yeah, that Space Wolves. I hadn't looked at Woody's list. I know he's been running Space Wolves, but he's also started running the new Dread detachment for Custodes.
Oh yeah.
So I wasn't sure what he was running, but yeah, if he's running Wolves, that's going to be a rough matchup. Definitely as well.
Yeah, it's definitely more into the Wolfen spam, because I think he's got a big brick of.
I just checked. 633 Thunder, 10-10-5 Wolfen.
Yep. One thing that I don't know if you know, another reason why I picked the planes. Do you know you can position the planes in a way where their blood surge, they have to go towards the plane, but they can't. Even if they get an engagement range, they can't fight them.
That's pretty funny, actually.
So I can set up a turn where I rapid ingress a plane, move it to right in front of the wolves, go, do you want a reactive move? And then move nothing else within range of it, so they have to go to the plane, and then just shoot the shit out of them. And even after they do the reactive move, the plane can still see them wherever they are.
Do they have anything that flies?
Assault Intercessor with Jump Pack. I think he's running 1 unit. But a unit of 5 doesn't take a plane.
Surely they don't even kill a plane yet.
No, not a chance. Not with a single Power Fist. If they were Blood Angels, different story. But not Stormlands.
Yeah, Lance lethal hits goes hard.
Yeah. And plus strength and attacks and everything else. But so that was one of the reasons why I consider the planes, that there are a bunch of reactive moves in the game at the moment, and it just takes away the ability for the reactive moves to do anything. Because they can get behind a wall, cool, plane comes in or flies over and gets you. But I was thinking about that when I was building lists, and I'm like, holy shit, how have I never made a video about this before? Mostly because we didn't have something that I wanted to run a plane in, but Oxcat is just... I really do love, and I think at this point we can kind of get into a little bit of talk about the detachment that we're running, because it is so goddamn true, and it's what I've been feeling this entire time, where when I'm list building with Oxcad, I can't make up my fucking mind, because everything is viable. Everything is viable. And it's such a great place to be in, because you've also got six stratagems that I will consider using at different points of the game. There are combos that I can build into with rampages and whatever else, or just go, all right, I can give my hammerhead advance and shoot, and I'm not in Montcar, which nothing else can give. And it just, so is there anything that like hurt you physically to have to cut from your list?
Things that hurt me physically. I wanted a second unit of fire knives. Just couldn't find the points for it. It was like if I'm running a second unit of fire knives, I just have to cut a breach of fish, and I decided I wanted the breach of fish a little bit more than the second team of fire knives.
Hmm.
What
Is there
else
a
is there?
world where you consider riptides?
Yeah, I was considering them as well. I had to cut a third unit of Vespid as well. I really wanted to fit them in.
Yeah.
But I had the original draft that I had was 1970 points with 3 units of Vespid. And I
Yeah,
cut the
right.
third unit of Vespid and got my 2 Crude Hound units in instead.
I think that is a very good choice. I think the Crude
Yeah.
Hounds are almost non-negotiable in Oxcad. The
Ah,
scout move and the speed and being able to just put one over the other side of a wall, there has not been a single game where that hasn't come up as an outcome for me.
yeah, if I had the points, I'd always run a 5 Vespid over a 5 Crude Hound.
Yep.
But in the circumstance of limited points, it just made sense to cut 1 Vespid for 2 Crude Hound, because 2 Crude Hound is better than 1 Vespid.
Yeah, I usually, like, when I'm building Oxcad lists, it's your usual stealth suits. It's your I always jam in 1 unit of Vespid. I've been putting in 2 units of Crude Hounds. If I can do 3, I'll do 3. But those last 40 points tend to be the negotiable points of like enhancements, that sort of stuff, or break points for the biggest stuff that I'm putting in. And wanting to run, duplicates and triplicates of stuff, because I've never been a fan of like just putting in a single Riptide. I think that one is easy enough to deal with or ignore, but when you've got multiple running around, that's where their strength actually exists.
But yeah, so I was considering Riptides, and then I kind of went back on them, because if I'm looking between Riptides and Ion Hammerheads, the Ion Hammerheads just get a bit more bang for their buck with the detachment rules. Again, it's the reactive fallback and it's the plus AP. Riptides are already at AP3, so going to AP4 usually not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Like sometimes is, of course, but getting from AP2 to AP3 is usually a lot more impactful.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that, like, any other like archetypes? Because I was talking in terms of like Breacher archetype. There was a version where I was looking at a Crisis suit heavy detachment. While I think it would have had play, I got to a point where I was just like, why am I not just running Retcad with this? Are there any other archetypes that you were particularly looking at, or are you sitting here kind of feeling like the list is the best thing I could come to? I don't think there's anything I would change, even after seeing all the lists available and the pods that we're in and everything else. How are you feeling about the list going into it?
Yeah, so the biggest concern I had was about the amount of anti-tank. I initially thought I'd be playing against Imperial Knights before the reshuffle. I wouldn't
Right.
have, because I thought it was 2v3, but it was actually 2v4, so I wouldn't have been playing against Imperial Knights.
Right,
That's
yep.
Adam from Pantheon, by the way.
Oh, yeah, yep.
Yep, I was getting worried about that, and then I kind of like mapped out, shooting lanes, deployment, and I was like, you know what, I think I'll actually be okay even with just one broadside team.
Yep.
So, if I thought I had enough anti-tank to deal with knights, then I think I'm all right in that boat. What else is there? But yeah, apart from that, I don't think it really have like an archetype, so to speak, for auxiliary cadre. I think the best way to describe it is just Tau good stuff, and then Kroot. That's kind of just how it plays, right? You shove in just efficient data sheets and Kroot, and that's usually just the best way to do it. But yeah, I suppose the modification to that is we are seeing Shadow Sun, and then the large amounts of rampages. That's the other way you can take the list, but I didn't have enough rampages to even bother considering that. So yeah.
Yeah. So, and that actually brings up a really good, because like Shadow Sun came into my mind a bit, and the Ethereal came in and out of my list a number of times. Is that something that you have considered?
Yes, I have considered the Ethereal. If I were to run the Ethereal, it'd probably be cutting one of the squads of Crude Hounds.
Yep.
Definitely a consideration, actually. In hindsight, might have even been the correct call. I've only just considered this now that we're talking about it. But yeah, so...
Yeah, he was in my list
one
a bit.
Ethereal, just shove it in strat reserves like you were doing at the start of the edition. He can come in, he can guide now.
Yep, which is why I was looking at him, because it is actually a big deal. He can take a marker drone, which allows him to advance and guide and have marker light. And I actually had him as my admired leader holder when I was not running a unit of crew carnivores, and I had him. It got to, like, against Chaos Knights, you can't have him on the board because he will just get indirected off there. Guard is the exact same if they're running their indirect stuff. But I did find that he was a hard one for me to cut. I needed the Kroot bodies, and I couldn't do it without the Kroot carnivores. I needed enough bodies to make people step out and allow me to play the game properly. But that ethereal, especially with all of the Battleshock shenanigans, I'm actually looking back on it, I'm like, maybe I should have had him for the benefits that it gives to everything around it and whatever. I admired Leader for the giving OC to stuff, because after, somebody gets stripped of their OC, if you give them one afterwards, it applies after all other modifiers. And so it can be a very, very powerful thing. I just couldn't validate him being in there. Shadow Sun made it into the list a number of times, but investing that 100 points for the reroll ones are nice, but I never break my back trying to make sure that I've got it. And the CP reroll, because it's on a 5-up, that is always something that I've taken issue with Shadow Sun, because she could be great, but every other leader that we're seeing, like Supreme Leader from all the other factions, they're just getting CP. And it kind of makes, like, yes, she's got great fusions, she's, lone op, she's all these different things, but to include her, I would need that CP gen as one of the big draws of having her. And a 5-up for me just isn't it unless I'm certain that I want those fusions.
Yeah, so I see Shadow Sun in the large Rampager builds, because the Rampagers are far more CP hungry than the non-Rampager spam builds.
Yep.
And you just need Shadow Sun to power the Rampagers, and like it is working. But it's just not something I've tried. It's not something I've tested, so I didn't really want to run Shadow Sun because I feel like I wasn't going to get enough value out of her, especially if I'm running 3 stealths. Also, that's the other thing you see in the Rampager builds. A lot of them only run 2 units of stealth suits.
Yeah, they need the points. Yeah.
But yeah, if I'm running a Fire Knife team and I'm running 3 units of stealth suits and I'm not running Rampagers, Shadow Sun just didn't feel like she was getting enough value when I was looking at my list, so I cut her as well.
Yeah. On the opposite side of that coin, did Farsight ever enter your mind?
No.
That was a very quick no.
If I was going to run Crisis suits, I'd put a Cold Star on him. Assault's just too good.
I have felt the same. An extra 2 inches of movement and Assault and 4 guns sitting on him.
For those who haven't done the math, the 4 guns on the Cold Star will always do more damage than the +1 to wound from Farsight. Always.
Yep. Even if you get a turn of move, shoot, charge, whatever, there is just so much more utility in it. And I have been struggling with the same thing because I love my boy, but I just can't fit him into a list at the moment that I like playing.
Yeah, I'd consider him if he was a little bit cheaper. I just don't. He shouldn't be the same cost as a Cold Star. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, so to close us out, Cooper, are there any tips with auxiliary Cadre that you've found that other people could start putting into their own games? Is there any cardinal sins with the list? Is there anything you would want to impart onto one of the Tau players trying to make OxCAD work?
Always make sure you have a CP to fall back at the end of the fight phase. Don't CP reroll a saving throw if you're going to need a fallback. Don't CP reroll a damage if you're going to need a fallback. And always look to charge a Rhino and then fall back aggressively as a move block. That stratagem is what makes the world go round. And the other thing is low not plus sticky objectives with Kroot is a drug.
It is really good.
Sorry, one more thing.
No, hit it.
If you go first on tipping point or search and destroy, Kroot carnivores can scout onto the midboard objectives, hold in your command phase, move backwards. You hold midboard with a sticky objective, and you're not standing on it. This only works if you go first. Don't do it going second.
Yep. Yeah, no, mate, that is great advice for everybody. I want to say a big thank you to Cooper for coming on and talking about Tau. We're the only 2 repping it at the tournament, so I hope that even if I don't perform, I hope you have a banger of a tournament, bud. It'll be good to see our faction doing well. But I've got high hopes for the both of us. I think we've both got pretty good lists, and there's play in both of them. Hopefully we get the tournament run to back it up. Also want to say a massive thank you to the channel sponsor, which is R&R Hobbies. In the description of the YouTube stream, there is a link, and you can use code Pantheon to get up to 26% off GW's prices. When you go to their website, everything will say on back order. That is normal. They are not a stock carrying place. They order as they go, but the order comes in very, very quickly. I want to say a massive thank you to them. And we are going to give you some updates across the course of the tournament. I'll probably do some hand cam chats with Cooper over like lunch or at the end of day one. We'll check in with you and see how we're going. A big good luck to everybody that's attending Masters. I am really just looking forward to going there, having some fun, playing against some of the best players in New South Wales. And yeah, I think it's going to be a wonderful day. So Cooper, thank you so much, dude. Thank you to everybody who's watching. And we'll see you in the next one.